What if I told you that Nigeria, once hailed for its booming economy and rising foreign reserves, is now drowning in debt so deep that almost every naira earned goes straight to paying off loans? This is not just a story about numbers, it's about how a country's decisions can lead to a financial nightmare. In 2006, President Olusegun Obasanjo was about to step down after working tirelessly to grow Nigeria's foreign reserves from a mere $5 billion in 1999 to an impressive $42 billion. This achievement was even more remarkable because the price of crude oil, Nigeria's main source of income, was only about $46 per barrel during his time in office. However, despite this progress, something kept pulling the Nigerian naira down. Even with $42 billion in foreign reserves, the Obasanjo administration faced heavy criticism. The reason? Nigeria was weighed down by a massive $36 billion debt. This debt was owed mainly to the Paris Club, a group of major creditor countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and others. Then, in April 2006, Obasanjo made a bold statement. Nigeria will not owe anybody in the Paris Club 1 kobo. A few days later, the New York Times published a headline that read, "Nigeria pays off its big debt, sign of an economic rebound." President Obasanjo had pulled off a major feat, but how did it all happen? Before this huge announcement, Obasanjo's administration had been in discussions with the Paris Club to find a solution to Nigeria's heavy debt burden. These discussions paid off in 2005 when the Paris Club offered Nigeria an unprecedented deal, a 60% discount on its debt. This meant that Nigeria could clear its entire debt to the Paris Club by paying only $12 billion out of the $36 billion owed. With $12 billion being written off, Nigeria became debt-free at least for a while. This move stabilized the value of the naira at the time, and with oil prices rising, the Nigerian economy grew rapidly, becoming the largest in Africa. This growth continued under Presidents Umaru Yar'Adua and Goodluck Jonathan. But then came 2015, and everything started to unravel. By 2015, Nigeria's economy was in shambles. The country was using almost all its revenue just to service its debt. But how did things get so bad? Nigeria's debt profile had ballooned to end $7.6 trillion in domestic debt and $7.22 billion in foreign debt. The country's debt service cost in the first quarter of that year alone was in $1.94 trillion. Fast forward to today, and Nigeria now owes a staggering $91 billion, both in domestic and foreign debt. Of this amount, $42 billion is foreign debt. According to Bloomberg, Nigeria spent 80% of its revenue on debt servicing in the first 11 months of 2022. The World Bank put that figure even higher, at around 96% for the entire year. But what does this really mean? Spending 96% of your revenue to pay off debt means you're borrowing almost 100% of your annual budget. This is scary because it means the country is trapped in a vicious cycle of borrowing and debt repayment, with no end in sight. Between 1999 and 2021, Nigeria's federal government borrowings jumped from $3.55 trillion to $26.91 trillion, an increase of 658%. Under President Muhammadu Buhari, Nigeria's debt increased from $7.3 billion in 2015 to $28.57 billion by December 2020. This caused the exchange rate to move from $197 to the dollar in 2015 to $381 at the end of December 2020. In just 6 years, one president increased Nigeria's debt by a staggering 173%. Now let's compare this with President Goodluck Jonathan's administration. When Jonathan took office in 2011, Nigeria's debt profile was $6.17 trillion. By the end of his administration in 2015, external debt had risen to $6.45 billion, and domestic debt had increased to $7.9 trillion. However, the naira remained relatively stable at N158.3 to the dollar. But after the 2015 elections, everything changed. By the end of 2015, Nigeria's foreign debt had jumped to $7.3 billion, and domestic debt had increased to N8.4 trillion. The naira crashed to N197 per dollar. And now, under President Bola Tinubu, the situation has only gotten worse. According to Vanguard, the federal government borrowed N20.1 trillion from domestic investors in the first year of Tinubu's administration alone. But why is the government borrowing so much? And what are they doing with all this money? The most apparent reason for Nigeria's rising debt profile is the rising cost of governance. This includes both recurrent and capital expenditure. Recurrent expenditure refers to the amount of money the government spends on salaries, overhead, and other operational costs. Capital expenditure, on the other hand, refers to spending on infrastructure and other long-term investments. The problem in Nigeria is that the government is borrowing heavily to cover recurrent expenses, leaving little for capital investments. As a result, infrastructure is crumbling, hospitals are poorly managed, schools are underfunded, and the public transportation system is a mess. All of this has led to a fall in investment, increased unemployment, and stagnation of economic growth. Borrowing without restraint weakens the naira, making imports more expensive and reducing the value of exports. This, in turn, leads to inflation, which makes it harder for ordinary Nigerians to afford basic necessities like food and household items. But there's more. The government is using 96% of its revenue to service debt. Think about it this way. If you worked for 30 days and earned N500,000, but had to use N480,000 to pay off your debt, how would you survive on just N20,000 for the next month? You'd have to borrow more, and the cycle would continue. This is the situation Nigeria finds itself in today. Is there a way out of this mess? Let's look at Argentina. When the current president of Argentina took office in December 2023, his country was in worse shape than Nigeria. But what did he do? He took measures to reduce government spending, cut down on the size of government, blocked the theft of public funds, attracted foreign investment through tax breaks, and improved the ease of doing business. It wasn't magic, just common sense. If you're broke, you don't go on a spending spree to build mansions and buy jets. You tighten your belt, cut back on unnecessary expenses, and focus on getting your financial house in order. In all honesty, if Nigeria were a company, it would have filed for bankruptcy by now, and the managers would likely be in jail. When the last administration was desperate for money, they turned the central bank into a printing press. With every naira they printed, the currency lost value, inflation soared, and people's savings became worthless. The recklessness of that administration is still being felt today, with the current government making things worse with more borrowing and spending. President Tinubu's administration has been acting like kids in a candy shop, spending money they didn't earn on things that don't matter. And who pays the price? Ordinary Nigerians, who struggle to make ends meet while their leaders live in luxury. But it doesn't have to be this way. Nigeria's leaders need to be honest with the people. They need to cut down on their ridiculous expenditures and focus on what's really important: fixing the economy, creating jobs, and improving the quality of life for all Nigerians. So, Mr. President, when will you start doing what's right for Nigeria? The country is in a mess, and the people are waiting for you to clean it up. The time for action is now.